Good morning, afternoon, evening, really early morning, really late evening, whatever time you're choosing to listen to this on your morning commute to the work or home or on a walk.
Running out of ideas.
Yeah, wherever, if you're flying.
If you're doing the dishes and got your earpods in.
Yeah, if you're mowing the lawn, wherever you are, welcome back to the Identity Human podcast. It's great to have you back here with your host, Don and
Ray.
Almond. Okay. No, I add that in that time. So it's great.
I love how when we have these intros, the guests just sit there kind of like,
I know,
what
are
we going to do now?
So speaking of guests, we have another awesome guest lined up, and it is officially Doctor now. Dr. Michael Passaportis. Welcome into the show. Thank you very much for joining us. So just to give you a quick background from my point of view, so obviously it's me and I used to call him Big M. We used to play rugby together. He is a stud, a pedigreed rugby player, played for Zimbabwe. He came over to South Africa and we played together there, and then obviously parted ways when I came over to England. So Michael Passo, depends what you want to call him. Thank you very much for joining us. We can officially call you Doctor, which is really weird to think about all the way back there. But well done. I think what a great journey. Do you want to introduce yourself from your point of view, what you do to any listeners that are like, well, who
First
is this?
Of all, I don't think I can top that. That was an amazing intro. So thank you for that. The doctor title still feels a little bit weird to me as well. It hasn't quite settled yet. But I guess I'm Dr. Michael Passaportis. I'm a sport and exercise psychologist in training. I am a lecturer in sport and exercise psychology at the University of Sussex in the UK. And I work as a sports psychologist as well. So, working with athletes, coaches, and teams around the mental side of their game. Yeah.
So very, very important. So if we're gonna implement the Martin Barnes principle here. So if I was to say to you, pitch to me in 30 seconds in the most ludicrous, out there kind of way, so that I'll remember you above anyone else, how would you say what you just said in a different way? So he came on and he said he wrestles crocodiles. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
I don't think I'm wrestling crocodiles. I'm perhaps helping people to, I guess, understand how to be the best versions of themselves, particularly around performance. Because I can't think of an animal to relate that to, and anything you need to wrestle. But
maybe like you're like the golden eagle of the animal kingdom, overwatching everyone and watching the hunters and getting the best out of them. Okay, so it's great to have you on here. And Identity Human, obviously, we're trying to get to who the person actually is. So I love the intro, but actually I want to dig into Michael and his journey. So I've chatted to you off screen and off topic, and I know that you've come on a really long journey, and you still got another 8 or so months until you can officially go out on your own, be part of the medical board and all that kind of stuff. Tell us a little bit about what that journey's been. So Ray will attest to this because of her route of finance and accounting and how long, and PhDs, which I don't have and both of you do. Not PhDs, you've got a master's, sorry. It's the same thing to me on the outside. So if you could just explain a little bit about the length of that journey and what maybe the biggest challenges along the way.
I've been studying now, probably going on 9 years. So the route to becoming a sports psychologist, so being able to officially call yourself that, involves registering with the Healthcare Professionals Council. And I guess if we work back from that, you've got to have an undergrad. So you've got to have an undergrad in psychology. After that, you then need a master's in sport and exercise psychology. So I've kind of gone that route. I did my undergrad while still playing rugby, so it took me roughly about 4 years. After that, I then went into my master's, did that at the University of Portsmouth. And at that point, when you finished your master's, you're now qualified for what they call stage 2. So that's going on and doing a professional development. At that point, I, for whatever reason, decided, now let me go do a PhD. So another 4 years of study towards that, which, was really great, and I learned a lot. But I still now am on that process of stage 2, which essentially is 2 years of supervised training. So it's like, I think it would be akin to kind of like a residency as a doctor or something like that. Basically, you're allowed to go out and practice, but you have a supervisor that you report back to and kind of reflect with, and they oversee the work that you're doing. Because obviously we're working with people's minds. We're working with quite, an important part. So you need to make sure that you're doing it ethically, and that you're doing it appropriately. So it's the final stages of training before you now come out and you go, okay, I'm now a sports psychologist and I can register with the Healthcare Professionals Council. I can go off on my own. I've been doing that for probably about just over 18 months now. Got about 6 months to go. And then I think it's a total of like 900 hours of supervised training.
Okay.
So working my way through that. I guess back to your question.
Crazy. So that's, sorry, the internet's a bit slow. What did you say?
Back to your question on the biggest challenges. It's just, I guess, staying the course. It's a long route, and staying that course with a family and with people to support can get quite long. But it's absolutely been worth it, I think, for the development and kind of all the learning that I've had from it.
Yeah.
So what family do you have?
So I am married to Lisa, South African lady, and we have a small boy called Luke. So he's just turned 4.
Very special.
So, I was chatting to you off record a bit, and I know that there's a very big difference between Ray coming out with her master's and the chartered account. Why do you keep it is master's?
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm just looking at you.
So,
what
because I'm going to contextualize it. Ray coming out with a master's in chartered accountancy lands her in a big opportunity to go into one of the big 4 globally, gives her a really high qualification and a really high earning potential. So that, whereas when I chatted to you, I said, okay, now when you've got that and you're back in South Africa now, what opportunities are waiting for you? And you're like, well, that's where it gets challenging. And obviously for me, I understand, like, if you're a psychologist and you're interested in people's minds and building them up, now you're going to go out on your own and run a business on your own. There's a whole different side of things that you've got to learn. And it's not going into a big KPMG or Deloitte where there's these salaries that allow you to find your feet. You essentially have to go out there and, I said, like, rely on your network. So, like, maybe give some challenges there that you're foreseeing, because obviously people are listening, are business owners, parents, be very similar. Like, what are those things that you're not looking forward to or already recognize are going to be tough?
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not like say you were to go and do physiotherapy, when you come out and you now need to do your professional development year, you can join a practice, or you can get an NHS post, or you can go in and work in an established business. Sports psychology doesn't work that way. There isn't a practice that I can go and join, or it's a lot about driving that interest yourself. So it's generating your own client bases, and building enough of it.
So your 2 hours of practice.
Yes, it's about building that sustainable base of clients, which can be really difficult. You need networks to draw on. You need people to kind of give you a chance, because you're technically still a trainee. So it's a lot about building confidence in what you can do, and getting people to, I guess, to see the value in what you can do. I found that a little bit easier here in the UK. I feel like there's more of not an acceptance, but more of a kind of an understanding that, this is something important, and it's just a little bit more, I guess, in everyone's mind. Whereas in South Africa, you say, I'm a sports psychologist, and people kind of take a bit of a step back, and barriers start to come up automatically. I think it's the word psychologist tends to put people off. But yeah, so I guess it's just.
No, I was just going to ask, so your 2 years that you're doing now to, get that official stamp of approval, who are you working under someone else's practice under their
Not
client
exactly.
base?
So I'm working in my own capacity, but I have a supervisor who I check in regularly. We discuss my cases with, and he's kind of a source of reflection for me. So if I'm working with something difficult, perhaps a difficult situation with a client or something I'm not so sure about, he's the one I go to and we work through that together. So he's essentially guiding me. We do supervision.
Okay, so you're very much ready. So, okay,
Try to give it time.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just talking
So
about
we'll
the
edit
lag.
this bit out, but there's, so like if Ray interrupts you, it's because I don't know why there's a bit of a lag. So at 10 minutes 30, we'll cut this
Yes.
out.
No, I was just saying, so that basically, because you are having to go out there and get those clients ready, you're really in having to go into that like business mindset of you have to build up this repeatable way of getting clients in, and like there's all those mechanisms that come around, those systems and processes around from invoicing and the finance function and the operations and the client experience. You've got all of that to build out while getting your experience, and then you've got a young family. So it's a really interesting time. And you also, what's exciting for us or for me having you on this podcast is, again, our target audience is parents of young kids in business, which is exactly who you are. But you also bring the really interesting angle that you've just spent 7-8 years studying the human mind and in a high performance environment and the psychology of things. So it's going to be really interesting to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, and I'll jump on there quickly. Is like, for me, what's jumping in my head is like that adage of a smoker can't smell their own breath. Is like you're going to be very good when you're dealing with someone else, but it's like, how are you going to try and make sure that for yourself you're maintaining the ability to handle the pressure and all that kind of stuff? Like, what are going to be your like go-to?
I mean, it's notorious, right? Doctors make the worst patients. I think it's the same with psychologists. We're very telling at looking at you and kind of working out what might be going on, but turning that lens towards us, we're perhaps not so good at that. I think hearing you both talk about all these things that we're needing to do. So there's the fundamentals of building a business and building a brand. I think from a psychology perspective, and that's where a lot of work goes into understanding we call it like philosophy or practice. So how we approach working with clients, and it's essentially our identity as a sports psychologist. So how do I want to work with people? And a lot of the training and development goes into making sure you're really clear about that. And I think for me, that comes first. Once I've got that, I can then build the business around that. I need to have a stable brand, essentially. And so for me, that brand it's got to be trustworthy. It's got to be respectful. It's got to be ethical. Those are the kind of things why I think I've really needed or wanted to go into this professional training route, so that I come up with the correct qualifications and I can kind of build around that I'm beholden to a board of ethics. There's certain ways that I have to practice that's going to protect the autonomy, the respect of my clients. So being really sure on, I guess, who I am as a psychologist first, and then building out from that. And then it's, again, turning that lens on myself. So I work from an acceptance commitment therapy perspective, which is all about values and committed action. So then, okay, what are my values? And then just making sure I'm acting towards those every day. Being mindful, being present, not getting stuck on thoughts and dragged off by unhelpful thinking, or getting caught up in fights with negative emotions or uncomfortable emotions. So it does help. It's just you don't tend to listen to it so much when it's coming from yourself as if someone else is telling you.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a very important question that I'm going to ask you here. And this is possibly going to make or break a lot of how you go into the first couple of months. Why should someone hire a sports psychologist?
Yeah, put me on the spot. Well, this is an elevator pitch. So I think anyone that's serious about performance is going to understand the need to, if we're talking about athletes here, they're going to understand the need to train physically. So they're going to be putting time in the gym. They're going to be putting time out on the field or the track or whatever their domain might be. So they're going to be working on their physical abilities. They're also going to be working on their skills, so working on their technical abilities, passing, catching, kicking, throwing, whatever that might be. They understand that they need to work on that. And then there will be tactics in there as well, so working on your tactical abilities, understanding the game, watching your footage, trying to make yourself the best athlete as possible. So that's kind of 3 pillars. But I like to think of this as a table, and there's a 4th leg that they're missing over here, and that's your psychological abilities. So that table's not going to be stable if you're not working on all 4. But the one that's often the most overlooked, the most misunderstood, underappreciated is that 4th leg. And so a sports psychologist is going to help you work on that leg and get that really stable. And then I guess to chuck that whole analogy out the window, there are actually probably less legs and they're actually rather layers. And so I would argue that that psychological bit that you're working on is probably the basis that all those others, if we're talking about high performance or elite performance, are going to be built on top of. You can be the most physically gifted, the most technical, the most tactical, but if you don't have that strong psychological layer so that you can put all those talents, put all those things you've worked so hard on display when it really counts, when the expectation is high, when the pressure is on, that's not really going to count for much. So a sports psychologist is going to help you to develop the emotional and mental skills to be able to perform when you need to be able to be at your best when it really counts.
Nice. So I'm going to go one level deeper and say, if I was to get Dr. Michael Passaportis into my team, what's going to differentiate you from someone else that's also a sports psychologist that's also doing a thing? So like into my sports team, because essentially that's where you want to see how you can affect people on an individual and on a sports and on a team level. Well, actually, it's a good question. Would you want to go individual when you go to a team? And then what would you bring differently? Like I'm selling you hard here. What's going to differentiate you?
You're really pushing him to do his elevator pitch.
Like, go for it. Let's go.
So in terms of, I'll break that down. In terms of individuals or teams, I have done both, and I really enjoy both. There are strengths and weaknesses, or pros and cons to both. So working with an individual, I am able to build that level of trust, that level of mutual understanding and mutual respect to go more in depth and to really get a full holistic picture of a person. I think, fundamentally my approach, we're people first and performers second. So that one-to-one approach allows me to really get to understand that person, understand all the influences that might be in play. It's not like as soon as we step over that white line onto the field, the rest of our life just stays behind. That's not how it works, right? We're human beings. So that individual approach allows me to get that level of understanding of the athlete, and then we can do some really meaningful work in that space. But it's one athlete. On a team perspective, I'm able to help more people at once, but you don't have the luxury of going, I guess, as in depth. I mean, the holy grail is being part of a team and getting able to do the group stuff, and then having the one-on-ones as well, so athletes can come to you and do that one-on-one work. So I think that sort of hybrid level would be the best, to be embedded in a team and have kind of as much access as that would be amazing. I guess what sets me...
So, yeah, go. This is what I wanted. Sorry, the delay stopped me. What sets you apart?
What sets me apart is I have a level of understanding from my previous career. So I played professional rugby for 12 years. There's a certain level of experience and a certain level of understanding that I've got from that. And it was really those difficulties and challenges and experiences I had throughout that career that actually pushed me into wanting to understand how to help people to better go through these than I felt I was able to. So I understand high performance, I understand the demands, I understand what people are going to. I've now added onto that with the education to be able to go, okay, these were my experiences, so I have some level of relation. But at the end of the day, everyone is going to experience things differently, right? We all have our own unique experiences that have influenced how we see the world. So I'm then able to relate from there. But yeah, I think, and there will be other sports psychologists who've obviously been performers before, but I think that kind of sets me apart from that perspective. And then again, just the way that I approach this. So I am of the fundamental belief that as human beings, we all, am I still there? Sorry. I'll start again. Yeah. Sorry, I came up with a spinning wheel. So I'm of the fundamental belief that as human beings, we share an innate drive for self-development and growth. Okay, we're all fundamentally driven to improve ourselves and to grow and to develop. And that given the right resources and being put in the right environment, people are going to strive to fulfill their potential. So that's kind of the basis that I start from. And then on top of that, I build, I guess, with a client-centered approach. So it's athlete first, I'm led by them. And then, yeah, I guess that's kind of my approach to it. I've lost my train of thought now.
No, it's good. So I really like your answer there, because I was hoping you would say that experience bit is what sets you apart. Because the best definition of mastery I've come across is the 3 levels of mastery. Is the emotional mastery, which is I know what it feels like because I've been there, I've had that experience. And you've got the cognitive mastery, and you've got your qualifications, which is I've read a book, I know the stuff now, which obviously you've read more than a book and you've done more than your fair share. And then you've got that physical mastery, which is practice over and over again. And that's that length of time that you've had to reinforce all of these things. Now, those 3 as a combination, if someone ticks those boxes off, so if you're listening to this as a listener and you're deciding, is this a good person to listen to? I'd urge you to have those 3 things. Like, do they tick the cognitive? Do they tick the emotional? And do they tick the physical? And how do I check that? So that's what I was really hoping to hear you'd say, because it's really good recognition. Now, before we started recording, you did mention a key part of when you dove deep into this, and it was, well, not dove deep into it, but transitioned into it, is when you were playing for Griquas in South Africa and you got injured and then suddenly your career was over. What was that essentially like? I don't know if you want to call it retirement, but there's a very big shift of identity in that specific moment where you've gone from still having those dreams of playing high level rugby to now just bang, all of a sudden you're going to go into that, whether that was planned or not, the psychology thing. How was that transition?
Yeah, so that was probably one of the hardest moments of my life, I think, just because how it happened. So I'd been at Griquas for just under a year, and I'd kind of worked my way onto the bench at first, and then I'd work my way into the starting lineup, and I was now starting to start regularly. And that Friday morning, I actually went in and signed a 2-year extension. That afternoon, we got on a plane, flew down to Durban. 30 minutes into the game, dislocated my shoulder, required surgery, reconstructive surgery, and that put me out for, I think it was about 9 months. 2 months into that rehab, I get a phone call. Sorry, they've had to kind of replace you. That contract is now null and void. Because I got injured in such a short window of signing it, they obviously couldn't afford to keep me on and pay for someone else. So just kind of cut me off.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there I was, must have been like 20.
You got injured doing the job
Exactly.
for them, and then they're like, sorry.
Welcome to sport.
It's brutal.
Yeah, so that was me at 20, 24, 25, with essentially this dream that I'd been pursuing for 5 years at that point, that I was on the cusp of making it. To have it just kind of yanked away was really, really hard. And I think at that point as well, I didn't have anything behind me. I'd put studies aside to pursue this, whether right or wrong. That was kind of the decision I made. So it was really, really difficult. I was fortunate enough that I got a bit of a lifeline to go over and play in France. So after the shoulder was all kind of fixed, but at that point I knew that this you're kind of faced with the reality that, you know, you're not going to be an athlete forever. You need something else behind you. And I think I struggled with injuries quite consistently throughout my career. And I'd never at any point did anyone talk to me about fixing anything else than the body. At no point people were like, oh, has your confidence taken a hit? Or how's your motivation? How's your drive? Nothing like that was ever. It was always just like toughen up and get on with it. And so I just remember thinking that there's got to be more to this. We can't just expect people to have to suffer through this themselves. And that's when I started to kind of go down the rabbit hole of sports psychology and go that route. But yeah, that shift of identity is really, really hard. And it does still impact me now. There will be times where I'll be standing in a lecture theatre talking and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't belong here. I am not qualified enough. I'm just a jock. I'm just a rugby player. I'm not qualified to be standing here talking to students about all this stuff. And then you have to kind of fight that. That's not who you are anymore. You've kind of changed. But it's a really, really difficult thing to go through. And it's still, yeah.
It's I was going to say, it's fascinating. So much I could say there, but obviously Don and I have been together since school. And I witnessed his entire professional rugby career journey, and exactly what you experienced, like the lack of support. There's so much like we could say around Don's, and we probably need to do a deeper session on Don's journey and like his injuries and the mental side of that, and how there's no support and how you're just told to play through this incredible pain where you can't even get out of bed in the morning without like kind of almost like tearing up in pain, but you have to go play a game, that kind of side of things. And then there's a whole nother mental side that I saw happen when you do happen to maybe get in the media bits and get in the limelight. And there's just all this social media and all this mainstream media about you. And actually you almost have, if I'm honest, I don't know if that was happy for me to say, you almost have teammates that are slightly jealous and actually are mean to you at practice or a game. So you have no one supporting you, and you have all this really mixed media being thrown at you, and you're in the limelight. And like that mental battle was another huge one for Don that I imagine you might have seen people go through. And so you standing there in that lecture theatre, it's almost like funny that you don't feel like you qualify because you've experienced it, kind of like those 3 pillars that Don talks about. You felt it at your core, what those feel like. You've been really close day to day with guys around you in the clubs who are going through that. And so actually you have more experience probably than you realize.
Well, and just quickly before we transfer over to you, I always like connecting this dot is the same mentality or personality, temperament type, because that personality can change, but there's an element of Michael Passaportis that would have been the same in your beginning of sport that is now in the beginning of where you are. It's like that ability to see that top, that's where I want to go. And holy cow, I'm so far away, so I'm not confident. And in sport, you would have done the same. You would have built yourself up. You would have driven. And it's almost like you've got to remember you're now at the bottom end of the ladder that you want to be at the top of, but you're not at the bottom end of the same ladder you started off with. So when I see you, like when I picture you standing in a lecture theatre, I'm like, that would be incredible for me to see it, because you've been through like your years of sports. You've been through the years of studying your years of sport, reflecting on it. And I would listen to you over any professor that's never played, because just through experience, you are far more qualified to understand what those principles are like in play. And also the stuff that you would filter out from the 100 tools or concepts you learn, those 6 or 7 that you latch onto is because they resonate with you. And I think resonate is an important word to think about when you're listening to someone that's got that experience and cognitive mastery, because they will link the ones that apply and get rid of the stuff that's kind of wishy-washy.
So that's our thoughts on
this is a bit of a therapy session for me. So I appreciate it. But no, absolutely. I've like run out in front of Loftus Versfeld. I've run out in Kings Park and not been overawed by that situation. My first lecture, standing up in front of 200 students, and just being like, "Oh my goodness me," terrified. just, like to carry that, I guess, that learning and that knowledge over into another context, I think is what's so difficult. And I think that's where transitions out of sport can be so hard. But yeah, I'll be the first to kind of tell an athlete, you've learned so much, sport has taught you so much that's going to be transferable. Even something as simple as being coachable is a skill that not everyone has, but it's so important to be able to take criticism, not personally, reflect on it and implement it. It's something that you have to do every day as an athlete. That works in the corporate setting more than you can know. Being part of a team, understanding teamwork and team dynamics, all those things count in your favor. But I struggle, I guess, to kind of see them in myself as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So now I just to latch onto your comment just before that. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was an assistant lecturer for a year at the University of Cape Town when I did my academic articles. So I know, and I had to lecture to theatres. And I remember also standing up in front of 200-300 students and delivering a lecture. And I like that you likened it to running onto the rugby pitch and how you maybe found that the lecture is more difficult. So I'm going to be like, okay, Don, now I know. I know that level.
It's a performance, isn't it? Right.
I'm joking.
So you're saying
it is like a bit of a performance, yes.
So just to clarify, you're saying you'd rather run out in front of 80,000 people and do a lecture?
No, but if Dr. Michael Passaportis is saying, I'm appealing to authority here. If he is saying, and appeal to authority, that it was more difficult to stand in front of 200 students, then I'm going to give myself a pat on the back.
But there's a crucial element of scale you're missing. That wasn't his first ever time running out.
I know, it wasn't.
That was his 20 or his 15th year of rugby before the scale got that big.
And you could even pull on the mindset there, but because not only did you have you had those proof of concepts that you had succeeded before then multiple times.
Rugby.
Yes, at rugby. Yeah. And you had your team. Whereas when you go up in front of 200-300 students,
it's your first time.
It's your first time in front of 200 students. You haven't built towards that necessarily. And you don't have a team to lean on.
That physical mastery of repetition you didn't have.
Yeah. I would love to, in all this conversation we're having, like everything we've been talking about, I've thought, how can we link this back to business? Because I appreciate, obviously, Michael's sports psychology, but we've spoken about how he's going into business. We both have businesses and our audience is kind of, in business. So is there anything particular that you want to talk or that we could ask, Michael?
Well, I'd love to have had this chat once you've got your full qualifications and you're 6 months to a year into your journey. Because for me, I found you can have the qualification, and if I put you in front of an athlete, you are flying. But as soon as I say, okay, hold on, come back here and sit behind the desk, and I would like you to start to LinkedIn market yourself and find the repeatable process of selling yourself go. That for me has been a big challenge, because I can sell. If you put me in front of a room full of people that need an accountant, I will sell 100% of Ray's stuff. I'm unashamedly I'm like, you need Ray. This is what you got to do. I'm like full blown at it.
But selling yourself.
But if I'm there trying to sell myself, I'm like, and it's like, why can't I just sell myself? It's like, come on. And it's like, that's where, and you have to build up the funding to get someone to sell on your behalf. And until you've done that, you've got to sell on your own. And especially I find...
I disagree.
No, well, hold on. Okay, you can disagree with me after this. Okay. If you are very people-centric, like you mentioned there about honesty and integrity and like all those things that really matter to you, there's an element of selling yourself in that you're going to have to, if you're not confident yet, you're going to have to sell what you don't necessarily have full confidence in. And that energy comes out. And that's where it gets difficult, because you understand that the person you're selling to, when it comes to mindset and mentality, is completely different to the next person. And so it's really hard to gain this repeatable sales process, because every person you have to learn comes from a different objection point, a different environment, and you have to learn how to communicate that one same thing.
Do you know what I hear?
Excuses.
Limitations.
Yes.
Limiting beliefs.
Yes, we're trying to break them.
Beliefs.
But I would help Michael.
Should we get some reframes going?
And you can,
all those limiting beliefs.
You can go ahead.
No, you've
Yes.
actually touched, and you've actually very intuitively touched on a very real, I guess, what's the word, like tension within sports psychology, is that idea of selling. So psychology isn't an exact science. So me standing up there and saying, 100% come and work with me, I'm going to fix all the problems, absolutely. We don't ever really get that confidence because, like you said, each person's going to be different. So selling something that you don't really have is what gets quite tricky if I'm kind of communicating that as it's in my head, which I'm probably not. But yeah,
I get it.
selling myself just like you is something that I'm really not good at. I think where I get a little bit better is the approach that I use. I'm very confident in that. So I'm very confident in acceptance commitment therapy or acceptance commitment training. I buy into that 100%. I can see how that works. And so I can sell this idea of it's all about building psychological flexibility, and we focus on these 6 core processes, and then that's going to help you. That part I get. I think where it gets tricky is my approach is I might be the expert in this stuff over here, but my client or the person I'm working with, they're the expert in themselves. And so it's about joining those 2 expertise in a way that's going to work for that client. So I've got a toolbox. The first tool I take out might not work for you. So we need that trust and that understanding for you to say, this is not working. And then we go back and get the next one out. And I think that's where my education, all the education and training, I think is around refining that toolbox and having a lot of different ways of helping somebody with the same problem. So how I sell that and how I package it, yeah, it's going to take a bit of work. And there's some people that do it really well. There's a lot of my colleagues and stuff that are all over Instagram and whatever else it might be, Twitter or X and LinkedIn. I guess I still have that imposter syndrome of being able to do that myself that I'm battling with. But yeah, maybe we'll get there. We'll see.
Maybe try a little experiment where you create like a ulterior like persona, and then you sell yourself in on behalf of yourself, but
Great
it's not
burner
you,
account.
and see how that works. Yeah, burner account, exactly that. So one of the other questions, I'll pick one and then Ray picks one, if
Sure.
you know these goes. But we've obviously got our like clump of questions, and the one I want to ask you is, what motivates you to keep pushing through difficult times where others may have given up? Because that's been quite a journey that you've led us into, because you've got your family, you relocated a few times. It's so much easier, in inverted commas, if you want to put easy in a different word, to have gone, do you know what, I can't pursue this dream of studying because it's not helping me build up that provider income that's needed for my family. So what's motivated you to keep pushing through those times where other people would have said, I'll just finish this later?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
So I think just to put that into context, so after my master's, I could have gone into essentially doing what I'm doing now. At that point, I didn't feel like I was competent enough. Not to say that, a master's, it's a great education, but I just felt like there's more I need to know here to be the best at this. And maybe it's that athlete mentality coming through again. I'm not willing to just do something and be okay at it. If I feel like there's something else I can do that's going to make me better, I'm going to do that. And that's why I went into the PhD, and I learned so much about that, working with Olympic sports and understanding that, and the level of, I guess, insight and critical evaluation that you get from the PhD, I think has certainly made me a better sports psychologist. I guess what keeps me driven is I've never felt truer to who I am than when I'm sat with an athlete and I'm helping them kind of work through, and you can almost see the like pressure just lift off them. They're like, oh, I can think about this a different way. And they almost get like free and just ready to go and be their best versions of themselves that they can. I've never felt more like who I am in that moment. And so I think in terms of, I could have dropped out and done something else, but I don't think I would have ever been fully who I am. And I think being fully who I am will make me better as a father, better as a husband. And I fully believe in this work as well. I fundamentally believe it's really important. And it can do a lot of good. It can change a lot. And it can make people just enjoy their sport so much more. And again, unlock that drive to be the best that they can, that fulfillment and that growth. And working in that space is I guess where I come alive. So I've known that for a long time, that this is what I want to do, but I just wanted to be sure that I feel I'm as good as I can be when I'm doing it.
Yeah. And so the question that comes off the back of that is fantastic. Like, I know I saw Ray light up where you said, I know that it's where I feel at home, or it's where I feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to do, because it's a very important concept, just that. But the role that Lisa has played in this journey, your wife, in terms of also, like, there's always another dynamic that we have to think about in someone's journey, and that support system is like, sometimes it's, has she been like, just keep going, or there's also been times where there's been a bit of pressure, and it's like, are you sure this is the right direction? And how have you guys navigated that? Then I'll pop over to Ray's question, because that often is the one layer out that we don't really hear about. And how has that been for you?
Lisa's been unbelievable. I mean, so we've been together since I was about 21, I think. So we're giving away too much here. So it's been about 17, 18 years now. So she's kind of been with me on this journey, and she's just always been 100% supportive. I mean, there has been not challenge, but like, is this the right way? And almost challenging me to be sure about it. And if I'm sure, then okay, let's kind of go for this. So she's always just been massively supportive of me. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I think where we are now, though, we see our life together as a family back in South Africa, which is why we're making the move back, which involves essentially me turning away from a stable academic career here to move back to South Africa, where we're both surrounded by family, surrounded by support. But that comes with the challenge of now I need to create something. And so now I guess it's my time to step up and kind of make that happen. So as a family, we can be where we need to be.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be useful to really flesh out or kind of extract a useful nugget of, I don't know, information that our listeners could really benefit from. So we're going to take, like, pretend Don is sitting here as a client that you are working with. This is a very mini session, okay? And you have 2 minutes with him. He has, if we just trying to draw some similarities here, he has a young family. And now you're obviously most familiar with the sport background, but I'm sure there's similarities here. Maybe, obviously in our situation, it's someone who's giving everything to their business or their career and everything to their family, and they are losing out in the situation. They're sacrificing themselves a bit. They maybe they're not at burnout, but they are heading in that direction. So like in a sports player scenario, maybe they're giving everything to their team, or if they're Olympian, everything, they're pushing their bodies to the utmost, treating their body like it can just keep going. At the same time, then when they're done their training, they're going home and giving everything to their family. What would be your one piece of advice that they could implement, like Don could, if he's that person, implement today to make an improvement?
That's a really great question. I think in 2 minutes, my go-to would be, what's your inspiration? What's your unshakable why? What's your reason that's bigger than your performance that drives you? So here we're drilling down into your values. What do you value as a person? Who are you? What do you show up for every day? When we're really clear on that, then our actions and our daily behaviors get a lot easier to do. We want to always be acting towards our values. We can think of them as a compass, essentially, right? They're a direction that we're moving. We're never going to get there. We're never going to be able to tick it off. It's not like a goal. If I have a goal to I don't know, run a certain time. If I'm an athlete, I can eventually tick that off. But if my goal is to be a good dad, I can't wake up one day and be like, done that, tick it off, I'm done being a good dad. It's something that we have to reaffirm every day. And that's where purpose comes from. That's where drive comes from. So I would ask that athlete, I would take them through a values authorship exercise where I would really get them to clarify who they are and what they stand for. And then part of that, if kind of the situation you've described, part of that is going to be being a family member, and part of that's going to be an athlete. And then, okay, so which behaviors are in service of those values and which ones are not? And if anything's not in service of those values, we can then start to trim that down so that we're 100% sure that we're living to who we are. Because when we align to who we are, that's when we're at our happiest, and that's when we're at our most fulfilled, and that's when we're able to handle adversity, handle setbacks a lot more than if we're doing things that aren't quite aligned with who we are. That's where discomfort comes from. That's where inflexibility comes from, and that's what leads to burnout eventually.
Great advice. And I think it's because people just get so stuck in the doing, and not, I don't want to almost say firefighting, but they get so just like, I must get as much done as possible. I must work through the days, that they forget to take that step back. And like you say, look at their vision, look at their plan. I often talk about like sitting down and actually mapping out what is your ideal week. And so that you building your life around that, like it's very similar around that vision, because people just get so trapped in the doing that they don't take that step back. It's a great way of framing it. I like that, the way you put it.
There's lots of crossovers, and I think the key bit there that you said is being able to identify or author. I think you use the word like, let's author your ideal self and see what's the dissonance, like how far away are you in what you're doing now, and where you leading yourself away from that,
and where you need to trim down,
and where you need to really focus in on as the crow flies. Are you taking that direction, or are you playing like army golf, left, right? When you actually just need to hit the ball straight, you're going left, right, because you don't know where you're trying to get to. I think it's good advice.
And I think trimming down is often, people really battle to let go of things. I mean, that's often where people struggle.
I guess, and we've had a little bit more time to answer that. The other thing would be get them to be present. So when you're with your child, are you with your child? Or are you with your child, but your thoughts are here and you're missing what's going on because you're worried about this or you're worried about that? Contact the present moment and everything you're doing and be in that now. So when you're at training, be at training. When you're at home, be at home. Very easy to say, very hard to do. But we...
Yeah. So, I mean, on that, it was really good example today. I had the kids at home and they were all busy doing their own thing. So someone commented on the podcast. They'd listened to an episode, and picked up my phone and I was like, I'm going to reply to this. It's an important part of what we're doing. I wasn't actively on my phone the whole time. And my son walked in and he'd created this Lego airport. And he was like, there's the guns that and he makes all the noises. He says, here's the landing strip. And I was like, half looked up. I was like, where are the lights? And then I looked down again. I was like replying. And then I just saw him stop and start to walk off. And so I stopped and I put my phone down. I said, I'm really sorry, Miles. You walked in and I was in the middle of something and I didn't give you preference over this phone. I put my phone and I said, that's not right. So please, can you come back and can we continue the conversation? Because I am actually genuinely more interested in you than I am in replying to that comment.
I know, and it's so easy to get caught up in like the business stuff.
Yeah, but he did. I think it really resonated with him, because what your advice and what we say and what everyone says, I love the terminology of putting it in a vacuum. And someone gave me this terminology the other day. I was like, that's brilliant. Is you have to discuss something in a vacuum, because if you don't, every excuse will make sure that you're not discussing what we should be doing. If you discuss it in a vacuum, it's then going, okay, I know that there's going to be elements of this that are hard to implement, but we want to catch ourselves as often as possible to rewire our intentions. So if usually you wouldn't be present where you are and someone says, now you're going to be present, you're not just going to suddenly flip. But if you can practice that the same way you would in rugby, the same way you would in anything, it's about being vulnerable enough to say, I'm sorry I wasn't present. can we please? And then moving forward like that. And I think the more times you forgive yourself and realize you're not perfect, but you're working towards it, the more often that practice becomes the norm. So it was a really good point.
Great.
And I think
Great tip.
for me, that illustrates perfectly, right? In that moment, you're a father, but you're a business owner as well. So in that moment, you've got two values. One is the father that you want to be, and the other is the business owner that you want to be. But that business owner, perhaps in that moment, wasn't as pressing as the values to be a good dad. And so in that moment, you kind of recognized which behavior you were acting towards, or which kind of path you were taking, and you were able to redirect towards something more in line with who you are. But I think the key point there is your ability to recognize what you were doing. And that's often another kind of fundamental area where we have to start with is awareness. So I broadly would call it focus. So have an awareness of what you're doing with your mind, and then recognize what thoughts are you paying attention to? What are you prioritizing? And then once you've got that awareness, you can then build on the skill of redirecting it to where it needs to go. And that's obviously really essential in skill execution. In performing a sport, right, you need to focus on the task relevant cues in front of you. If you're thinking about all these things over here, you're missing what's going on in front of you. But it's the same principles. If you had not had that awareness and you'd stayed kind of engaged with your phone, you would have missed those task relevant cues that actually your son is disengaged from this conversation because their attention wasn't there. But you had the mindfulness to recognize what you were doing and redirect and salvage that, which we often so much on autopilot that we don't really know what we're doing with our mind, and we just kind of go through the motions. And that's where those disconnects happen.
Yeah, nice.
Great
I like the way you contextualize that too. It's really useful. So hopefully somebody listening would take away something that's like just be able to recognize is half the battle. So we've gotten to 52 minutes, and this is the point where we're going to say that like it's been fascinating having you on here. But there's one last bit: is how can people get hold of you? How can they follow you? How can they follow your journey? And as we're putting this in, I'm going to say get him while he's cheap, because you obviously are going to make a big success of it. And actually, if people get in with you now, as you go with that journey, they are going to be able to go on that journey with you. So how can they find you? Where do you want them to look? How do you want them to engage with you?
Well, I'm across X, so I think it's Mike Passo on X. I'm on Instagram as well. I think it's Dr. MP Sports Psych, but we can kind of link those, I guess, in the episode. So I'm available on those. And then I think so. I've got a website as well that people can contact me through there. And then, I think just also via email. It's just very simply michael@michaelpassaportis.com. So I'm available across all.
Okay. Perfect. Do you have any comments?
No, perfect. I don't have anything else to add.
No, thank you. So
it's been really, really awesome to hear the framings and ideas in your story. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of young athletes that I they follow on Instagram. They'll ask questions, and I think there's a big surge in how serious people take sport at a lot younger age. I'm slightly worried about it, but I really want they just need someone to be able to help them in that journey. And I think if you're listening to this and you have a young kid, get hold of Mike. Just say, can you do a webinar? I'll be keen to join. Kids got these questions, because you've got you go and volunteer in the community of coaching. There's some parents that take it way too seriously, it genuinely does concern me, because the psychological effects of what they're doing to those kids at that age, they'll only see when they're at 18, 20, and they are in a high pressure environment, and the damage is already done.
Absolutely.
So, if you guys,
it's unfortunate, but so some of the work that I end up having to do is unlearning those patterns of behavior that child has learned all the way through, due to kind of the pressure that's been put on them. Unlearning those unhelpful kind of habits and those unhelpful behaviors, and reframing, I guess, those experiences. Absolutely vital. And we call them
Okay. Well, I
We
feel
call
like
them
there's a
psychological
webinar.
skills or mental skills
Yeah,
for
go
a
on.
reason, because they can be learned. So something like resilience or mental toughness, although I don't really like that term, or say mental strength. You're not born with it, and you either have it or you don't. It's something that can be built and something that can be trained. And the earlier you start building those things, the more, I guess, like any skill, the more adept at it you become earlier on.
Yeah.
So I'd be intrigued, putting you on the spot again. Again, like what would be a top tip on something simple that we should be doing with our kids to help them build their mental resilience? Like what is something you do with your 4-year-old?
Great question. And I'll use I don't want to get too technical, but it comes down to how we use language and how we frame things and how we make connections. So something as simple there, I listened to an excellent talk by one of, I guess, the kind of leading people in ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, and he was talking about how very simply we make the connection between nervousness or anxiety as something bad or as something negative. So he's talking about it in a pee-wee baseball kind of context, but it's like you're there and you're watching your son, and it's their first game, and they're now up to bat, and they walk up and they're standing there and they're getting ready to swing, and you shout out, "Oh, don't be nervous, son. It's going to be okay." Up until that point, that child hasn't made any connection that those feelings that are inside them are something bad and something they shouldn't be feeling. So at that point, you've now told them what you're feeling now is not good. You shouldn't be feeling that way. Whereas it's a natural human reaction to feel anxious or to feel nervous when you're doing something important. So right from that, already at that stage, you're teaching that child to make a connection that they shouldn't be feeling these feelings and that there's something wrong with them if they are. Don, have you ever played a game where you weren't nervous in your life? Like, very rarely is that going to happen. So I think we make unnecessary expectations on people that their thoughts and their feelings are wrong. And that to be a good athlete, you should never be anxious and you should never be nervous and you should never be afraid or anything like that, when that's just part of being a human being that's doing something really important. And it's not about an absence of them. It's about being able to perform without letting those control you. So yeah, very long-winded answer, but I think being conscious of how we take them.
No,
That's great.
And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways is the unawareness of how we say things in the best intentions will undermine the psychological layers that kids build up.
And there are even common phrases that we picked up from that were said to us. Like,
don't even
be
start,
nervous.
yeah.
That's like it was said to us, and it's so hard as parents. And maybe we are over-informed, and there's like an overload of information on social media telling us about these really cool, kind of like you say, Michael, these really cool tips and tricks on how to maybe develop mental resilience or improve, help kids be better equipped for the real world than maybe we were. Not to like shoot our parents down, but there just is more information out there. And there's so many things to do, but it's great. I think it's great to listen to all the ideas and maybe pick one or two that resonate with you, and we can just do the best we can. And I think, kind of like going back to your example, it's I think it's important, and you always highlight this, Don, to what's the word? That's the word, vulnerability. To show our kids that vulnerability, show them that we're learning and we're trying to be better. So like if you do mistakenly tell them, don't be nervous, you can maybe explain, actually, I've heard that I shouldn't be telling you that it's bad to feel nervous. Let's talk about this. And I know also even in business, like my kids have seen me a couple of times get really stressed out and actually been in tears once or twice about work in the past. And I think it's important to not always hide them from your kids so they can see you going through those emotions too. And then you can talk about those.
Yeah, good ways to learn. Yeah, in
fact, that's always a work on. It's a constant work on.
Yeah, we could make another whole episode of that but I think it's a work on, but at different levels. And every time you learn something, the next learn comes along, and you have to keep reflecting on it. So yeah, but Mike Passo, thanks very much again for coming on. We could keep this going on and on. I think it gets more and more fascinating when we start to dig into it a little bit. So hopefully in the future we revisit you coming on and we say like, this is what happened last time. How far have you come? And I really look forward to seeing your journey and your progress and seeing your name up in like making waves and revolutionizing how many sports teams and coaches bring people on because of the effect that they've seen you've had. So thank you very much. We'll urge people to go and follow you and ask questions. You're very helpful and giving, and we'll want to help as many people as you can. And I'm going to reemphasize this: get him while he's cheap, because as he starts to get a name for himself, that as is human nature, it just turns the other way. And I fully believe you will make it to the top. So, guys that are listening, remember Ubuntu. We are who we are through others. I'll work on me for you if you work on you for me. Right. Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.
That's on the hour. Boom.
Nice.